Jonathan Goulden, independent lay member.
Councillor Richard White, Newtown Town Council.
Right, Clive.
Clive Pinney, Head of Legal Services and the Council's Monitoring Officer.
Liz.
And in Brecon East.
Okay. Nigel.
Nigel Stewart, independent member.
Right. Is that it? Anybody else?
Yes,
Councillor Ian.
Yes, hi everybody. Councillor Ian McIntosh, member for Usquare, Pondy, Saf and Candy Ward.
Excellent. Anybody else here? No? Okay, we'll make a start then. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for attending, and sincere apologies for the very long delay in getting going. Technical issues, as unfortunately often besets these sort of things. So, Paul Egan, I understand you're from One Voice Wales, and you're thinking of talking for about half an hour, if that is still the case, with about 15 minutes of a talk and 50 minutes for questions. So over to you.
Well, I don't think I need 30 minutes to present the presentation I've got. First of all, can I check whether you can actually see it properly on screen?
Yes,
yeah?
you can.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was asked to come along to the meeting to explain to you about what's involved in the Civility and Respect project. Before I go into the presentation, can I make it very clear that the main partners in this are the Society of Local Council Clerks and the National Association of Local Councils. One Voice Wales is involved in the group, but because of the different ethical framework in Wales, some elements of the project may not be entirely suitable for One Voice Wales to communicate to member councils within Wales. So what we're doing is picking out bits that are relevant and then conveying those to our member councils. I've been on the group for probably now about 9 months, and the reason why there was a project set up for this, which has been funded jointly by the National Association of Local Councils and the Society of Clerks, is there was evidence obtained from a research study that far too many councillors and clerks were leaving the sector due to being treated with disrespect and bullying, and even worse. And I have to say, in Wales, there are pockets where this is happening as well. It's not unusual in Wales, and we often get requests for advice to advise on individual clerks in particular who are bullied and harassed by individual councillors, not by councils. I've never come across that, but by individual members within a council. So we are aware it is an issue in Wales. It's probably led to some issues regarding retention of clerks, and at the moment there are recruitment issues of clerks as well. Whether that's because of some of the experiences of clerks who've left these councils has spread within a particular part of Wales, I don't know, but there certainly are issues concerning recruitment and retention at the moment. And when this occurs in a council, it does impact on the well-being of everyone, really, not just the individual that's being bullied and harassed, but also about the councillors who see it happening and feel as if they're handcuffed, really, and prevented from doing anything about it. Up to the point of the research study, it was found that the problem was pretty well hidden and nobody was really talking about it. But there was evidence of councillors leaving because of it. There were quite a number of clerks, in particular in England, who were paid off with settlement agreements because the council felt that there was nothing more they could do to exercise their duty of care. And it was also producing a detriment to local communities, because if a clerk is not being treated well within a council, or councillors are not treating each other properly, then it means that the services they provide are undermined. There's no doubt about that. So the project defined civility and respect as being: civility means politeness and courtesy in behaviour, speech and in the written word. And they also come up with examples of how civility and respect can be demonstrated, which would be by listening, paying attention to others, having consideration for other people's feelings, following protocols and rules, showing appreciation and thanks, and actually, above all, being kind to each other. So these are the kind of messages which are coming out of the project, and they're being cascaded down to councils in England and in Wales as well. So the project itself, you'd probably like to know what's involved with it. I can tell you a little bit about it now. Now, NALC, the Society of Local Council Clerks and One Voice Wales, believe now is the time to put civility and respect at the top of the agenda and try to start a culture change in the local council sector. Now, in England, the situation with the ethical framework is a little different. There is no public services ombudsman for England, whereas there is in Wales, as you all know. In England, the person that would investigate a complaint against a councillor or against any councillor really would be the monitoring officer for that specific area. That's not the case in Wales. It's generally expected, though, that monitoring officers, and I know Clive does this, give advice to clerks when they're unable to advise themselves on a particular issue occurring in the council. But in England, the situation is a bit more difficult because providing advice by a monitoring officer could be the very individual that carries out the investigation. So that's proving, I think, a bit problematic. As a result, there's quite a lot of lobbying that's going on in England, lobbying of MPs really, to try and review the ethical framework in England so that some of these problems, particularly in relation to civility and respect, can be effectively dealt with, making sure that councils then are not brought down by some of the poor behaviour that exists. So looking at the scale of the issues, for example, some of the solutions shown at the top of this grid are trying to resolve things internally, getting advice from One Voice Wales, or referring a complaint to the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales, and maybe as well obtaining advice from the monitoring officer about how things can be managed locally. Then when things get a bit more difficult, they pass the line where whatever is being done is not resolving the situation. It's recommended that specialist third parties might be involved. And that becomes a bit more complex and harder to resolve the matter. So in terms of stabilising things in councils, the project has come up with a number of options here: reviewing best practice, reviewing key documents that exist within the council, having effective governance structures, and above all, having training in place for councillors and staff. Now in Wales, we have got the benefit of Welsh Government funding to enable councils to have a number of free places and access to a bursary to obtain training from One Voice Wales, and that's working pretty well. The training we've provided since the elections last year has been the highest ever in the history of One Voice Wales by a very wide margin. The only problem is when I started to research how many councils were accessing the training, I found it was only about 40% of the 732 councils in Wales were actually accessing our training courses, including code of conduct. That may be that code of conduct training is provided by the monitoring officers, so there are other avenues for that kind of training. I don't know. In terms of minor impact, it can be major impact if used wisely and accepted by the parties involved. As you probably will be aware, and if you're not, One Voice Wales produced a local resolution protocol a few years back. I think the person that wrote it within our team actually consulted, I think, with Clive, but it was developed and endorsed by the Ombudsman for Wales. That is available to councils, and we give guidance from time to time on how it should be effectively used. And I think it is used. Whether it's used to great effect, I'm not sure, but it is used in Wales. We know that from the advice that we're asked to give. Then there's moderate impact. This is about how things can be resolved with support, advice from One Voice Wales and monitoring officers. The only trouble is when it reaches that stage, in particular with clerks who've been subject to bullying and harassment, you often get the impact of mental health issues. And I am aware of a number of councils in Wales whose clerks have been off sick for quite some time with work-related stress. And I know some of them become very ill over it as well. Then there's the major impact. That would be probably where something will go to the Ombudsman and it's being investigated, maybe there will be an outcome. The issue there, as we find it, is for employees making those complaints, and maybe councillors as well, there is a long lead-in time to find out what the results of those investigations are and what this sanction might be imposed, if any, by the standards committees. So that can take some time. And if somebody is being bullied and harassed during that period, sometimes the bully doesn't ease off, even though the matter is under investigation. And there's the critical impact, which is resignations. If you were to look at the One Voice Wales website for job vacancies, I've never seen so many job vacancies in my 11 years with One Voice Wales. They keep coming up all of the time. Then there's the reputational risk, because what happens amongst clerks and other staff is if any of them have been bullied and harassed, they tend to tell their colleagues within the region, and then you soon find the word gets around that's not a council you would want to work for. And I know of a number of councils who really struggled for well-paid jobs, potentially very good jobs, where there's a reputational damage which has already been which has occurred, and potential candidates are aware of that. So that's some of the critical impacts of lack of civility and respect. So what is this group doing about this? Well, these are some of the work streams. First of all, training, which is an obvious one for both councillors and staff. There's leadership training offered, but not by One Voice Wales, but by the National Association of Local Councils. I don't know how many Welsh councils are taking advantage of that. I don't know. And on the governance stream, there's been a number of governance and enabling documents prepared, HR policies, quite a number of those, and also a recruitment and retention guide, which has been produced, which One Voice Wales is currently looking through with a view to try and simplify it. It's a very long-winded document, covers every angle, and I think it's really good. My profession is HR, and I looked at it and I thought I couldn't do better than that myself. On the other hand, I know how small councils operate. If I sent them this wodge of documents about how to retain and how to recruit a new clerk, they'd probably give up after a few pages and look to their own devices. So we're currently looking at slimming that down so it focuses on the key elements of that recruitment and retention guide. Then there's intervention, how to identify struggling councils, providing a support package. I don't think One Voice Wales would be doing a lot there. We are a very small team. I think there's more being done on that within the English setting, where the Society of Clerks and One Voice and National Association are much larger organisations. Then there's legislative, workstream 4. That's not happening as far as One Voice Wales is concerned. We're not looking at that. We know the ethical framework is different. We know about the Penn review, which is currently being considered. But in England, they are canvassing MPs to try and get a change in the ethical framework in England. But that's for the National Association to take that forward, not One Voice Wales. In terms of collaboration, again, we work closely with the Welsh Local Government Association and the Society of Clerks, but we're not engaged with the Local Government Association, which is part of the work, and that's part of what National Association of Local Councils will be doing. There's also on number 6, enabling. There is a website available from both those sister organisations, that sister organisation in England and the Society of Clerks, which includes all the documentation relating to this project and signposting to further support on other member websites. So that's the kind of project themes that are being developed. They've almost been completed, but there is still work ongoing. Concerning complaints that aren't upheld or never reach formal complaint stage, they seem to be the significant time stealers. And there's issues there about officer and council time being lost and the cost of that. Corrosive nature of lack of civility and respect. Some councils fail to recover when they've gone through the experience of trying to deal with civility and respect without any satisfactory outcome. And culture and behaviours can often deepen as the process continues to a level where an outcome is not seen to be viable. I don't know whether this is the kind of time stealers which apply in Wales. I suspect they do, but only in those councils where they've experienced issues of civility and respect. One thing One Voice Wales has done, which is more specific to Wales, is we produced a bullying and harassment guide. I wish we called it Civility and Respect now, but it was published about a year ago. We did that jointly with the Society of Clerks, and we consulted with the Ombudsman for Wales before it was finalised. So that's gone out to every council, and I know some councils are using it where they are experiencing civility and respect issues. On the training side, if you're wondering what sort of training is offered, but this is really available from the National Association of Local Councils and the Society of Clerks. It covers things like resilience and emotional intelligence, leadership in challenging situations, respectful social media, civility and respect generally, and what makes people challenging, and personal resilience and self-protection. My guess is that most councils in Wales have not taken advantage of that training. I know one or two have, but not very many. It seemed to be more centred on situation in England. As far as interventions and solutions are concerned, we have, a bit like the diagram earlier on, One Voice Wales monitoring officer's advice is on the left, specialist third parties on the right. Do we offer any service from One Voice Wales with specialist individuals? Well, the answer to that is yes. We do have a trained mediator and conciliator as one of our consultant associates, and he's been used on about 2 occasions, that's all, to try and help resolve an issue at an earlier stage than really when it gets really complex and hard to resolve, because that's when councils tend to rely on the Ombudsman to try and resolve it for them. So in terms of what's happening here, we recommend that all councils have a staffing committee with clear terms of reference, an induction guide for members and staff, which we're going to publish very soon, an officer member protocol to show what the difference is between an officer and a member and how they should relate to each other in an ideal world. Dignity at work policy, yes, we've got one of those, which is going out to councils. In terms of training, we provide code of conduct training in One Voice Wales, but I know that monitoring officers do that as well. And the code of conduct, well, they don't have quite the same in England, but we've got one in Wales, we know that. So I think we're well placed with that. And then a variety of employment policies, just to pick out a couple: discipline and grievance, sickness and absence management, and safeguarding and lone working. The moderate impact is an early evaluation tool, which has not yet been completed. I'm not sure how relevant that will be in the Wales situation. And also what role OVW will have. I think some people have suggested that we go in and help resolve this. The trouble is we don't really have the resources to do that, and we would stray well clear of that because we just don't have the manpower to do it. And the major impact there is identified in the end, and we do provide external HR advice. That's one thing we do. And we do have, as I say, a trained advisor and a mediator, but only one for the whole of Wales. In terms of governance, no, we went wrong there. There we are. In terms of governance, we will be producing a recruitment guide shortly, as I mentioned earlier, a councillor officer protocol, a new guide to social media, and roles and responsibilities identified within the councillor officer protocol. These are documents where we're giving consideration to them through a recruitment and retention task and finish group, which comprises of a number of councillors from our National Executive Committee and a number of selected clerks. So that will probably be produced in the autumn. That will help quite a number of councils, I think. In terms of areas of work currently in progress, we're looking at a communication strategy for councils, conflict resolution, and also about a policy for hybrid home working. And how do we promote this project? Well, we did create a civility and respect pledge. My dulcet tones are on that, encouraging councils in Wales to sign up to that pledge. and also encourage those councils to public sign up to that at their meetings. And when signed up, council will receive a numbered certificate and is added to a digital map. So that's a way of, if you like, heightening the profile of its importance. And the pledge itself, that says, to treat other councillors, clerks and all employees, members of the public and representative partner organisations and volunteers with civility and respecting their role. So what do you have to do to be able to get that certificate? Well, you need, when signing the pledge, the council must agree to the following statements: that it has put in place a training programme for councillors and staff. There's a slight advantage in Wales there because it is a statutory requirement to have a training plan. That's not the case in England. Has signed up to the code of conduct for councillors. Well, they have to do that anyway, and councillors sign up to abide by the code as part of their declaration of acceptance. Have good governance in arrangements in place, including staff contracts. Will commit itself to seeking professional help at early stages should civility and respect issues arise, and will commit to calling out bullying and harassment when it happens, and will continue to learn from best practice in the sector and aspire to being a role model for civility and respect. And at the moment, over 1,200 councils in England and Wales have signed up to the pledge. They've committed themselves to empowering each of them to call out disrespectful behaviour. And the next challenge is to see beyond the pledge and see how many councils take up these training opportunities, take up the governance policies and adopt them, and seek to have a way of resolving things early by the effective use of the local resolution protocol. The last slide is to show you where these pledges have been taken by councils in England and Wales. You'll probably notice, well, you will, it's very obvious, there's far less councils in Wales that have signed up to it than in England. That's probably because quite a number of bits from this policy work, this civility and respect project, don't particularly fit well in Wales. And One Voice Wales is careful what we put out because we don't want to give the impression to councils in Wales that the same situation applies as it does in England. But looking at the map, I don't know whether you can see that, but you'll see that in Wales there are some councils that have signed up to the pledge, but very few compared to the situation in England. I'm not too worried about that because we have a different ethical framework, and I'd like to think they would sign up to the pledge. I would, but I'm pretty certain that if it was put to the councils, they would sign up. As I can't see any reason why any council would not, because who would want to say we don't want to eke out any form of civility and respect issues within the council? Surely everyone would want that as a reasonable aspiration and a reasonable way of making sure the council's is effective as possible. I'll stop there. That is the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions if members have any. So I'll take that down if I can.
Right. Any questions, anyone?
Jonathan, thank you very much indeed, Paul. That was a really interesting and thought-provoking presentation. I was going to ask you, what's the most helpful thing that a standards committee can do to promote community councils in our county from signing the pledge. But I just want to be sure from you that that's really what you want to encourage right now. I realise there are some quite profound differences between the Welsh and English system, not least the lack of effective sanctions in England. There's no ability to suspend or remove a councillor from office, and that is seen as a key weakness. It's rather like trying to build an arch without the keystone.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to get a sense from you about whether you feel there's a need to apply a little bit of Welsh badging to some of the materials before we went all out to promote, or whether you're happy that as long as the message is there's lots of useful material here, but you may need to be a little selective, is still appropriate?
Well, I think that it might be better to hold off until One Voice Wales has gone through all the materials and made them more Welsh specific. Once that's done, it'd be great if standards committees throughout Wales would endorse the pledge and encourage councils within their area to adopt that pledge. I think that would make a huge difference. One thing in my own area, because I'm a clerk as well down in the Vale of Glamorgan, the standards committee, we don't have as many community and town councils as you do in Powys, but over a period of time, members of the standards committee do actually go and sit in council meetings. They observe what's going on, and then they give a feedback then to the chair or and the clerk of the council on their findings. I don't know whether you've thought about that in Powys. I think that's going to happen as well in Conway, and I think it's happening in another part of Wales as well. But I know you've got a lot of councils within your area, so I don't know how feasible that is. 110, as Clive has put up, is a lot. I will send the presentation to Carol, so you can all have a copy of that. And I think when I've made the documentation more Wales specific, I think I'll then communicate with the monitoring officers in Wales, Clive obviously included, and others, to say this is available, and ask whether standards committees could be asked whether they would endorse and encourage councils in their area to adopt the pledge.
Yeah, that sounds very positive. Liz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul, for the presentation. I've got a question in relation to the supervision of clerks, the supervision and appraisal of clerks, and the consistency. Because you spoke at the beginning about, the fact that a lot of them are being, bullied by councillors and in difficult situations. And I just wondered if you've got any views or, from your own experience, any thoughts about how there could be more consistency introduced into the support and supervision that town clerks, community council clerks receive, because in my experience it is quite ad hoc and can change from year to year depending on who's the chair of a particular council or who the mayor of the council might be. So it can make it, I think, very difficult for clerks to get the support that they need.
Well, as you probably know, the clerk is responsible to the whole council. Yeah. And they don't really have what we would describe from our careers as a line manager, only for minor things like approving leave or taking details of a sickness absence. So what many councils do is they have a staffing committee, and it's the staffing committee or a subcommittee of that deal with the appraisal of the clerks. And wherever possible, there would be some members who would be there year in, year out, even though the chairship might change. Second part of this this project, I mentioned about HR policies. One of the documents that's going to be prepared is a standard appraisal scheme, which we will be endorsing and sending it out to all councils. And with that, there will be guidance about how best to organise appraisal within the council. And I think that's very important, Liz, that is done. I suppose clerks, more than any employee I've ever come across, need this more than those in a larger organisation where they've got other networks that they can rely on for support. A clerk can be a very isolated position, and providing they're relating well to all the councillors, and that's not to say councillors need to be nice and polite all the time. There is going to be an element of scrutiny and challenging statements, but if you get the right people in these roles, they're used to that and they'd be prepared to handle that. But what they can't handle in many cases is where people go beyond that into bullying and harassment. And I think having a personnel committee or staffing committee with a responsibility for supervision and appraisal would be a really good, effective support network for those clerks within a council. So I'd agree with you.
Could I just come back? Do you have any sense of the extent to which that happens in Wales? I mean, it is pretty much the model that is used by Brecon Town Council.
Yeah.
But I just wondered to what extent it is used in that way by other community councils. I mean, you may or may not.
Yeah.
But...
Well, I'd give you my anecdotal evidence. I'd say out of the 732 councils in Wales, probably no more than about 70 of them use the process.
Okay, thank you.
And in councils where the clerk is happy with the role, they're not being bullied, they're probably not going to raise it as an issue anyway.
No, that's, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Richard?
Paul, in Newtown Council, this is just a comment to begin with. In Newtown Council, on the agenda of every full council and every committee, the first item, or at least the first item after apologies and so on, is to remind councillors of the code of conduct and the need for civility and respect. And I don't know whether that is common among other councils, but certainly it is something that I think our clerk introduced some while ago. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about when cases are referred to the Ombudsman, the long time that it takes to arrive at a decision. And since I've been on the Standards Committee back last autumn, I've noticed that he does seem to take an inordinately long time to arrive at a decision, even to arrive at a decision as to whether he's going to investigate in the first place. And I would imagine that is because he hasn't got enough staff, and I wonder if there's anything One Voice Wales can do to put pressure on Cardiff to increase the staffing at the Ombudsman's office. Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer your questions. First thing, I have seen the reminder about the code of conduct on council agendas elsewhere. I don't think it happens very often. I think it's a good initiative. There's nothing wrong with reminding people of what their obligations are, and I think that's a timely issue, isn't it, when you pick up the agenda to be reminded, and I think that's important. I have seen it used just in a handful of other councils, but not very many. I suspect it's not used very often. Second one is we are aware of the delays that can be taken with an investigation. It may be partly down to the staff. As somebody that does do investigations on behalf of One Voice Wales, I'm also aware how long investigations can take. And they're often dependent on the availability of witnesses. If somebody says something, you've got to go back to somebody else to check it out. It's not something that can be done in 5 minutes. But I do think there is a long time periods before the end of an investigation. I suspect there are some issues with staffing in the Ombudsman's office, and I can assure you that One Voice Wales does raise this issue whenever we have the opportunity to do so. And we did raise it with Richard Penn when he consulted with us on his review of the ethical framework, and we'll continue to do that as well.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Could I add to that? At the National Standards Forum, we had somebody from PSOW come, and they said they've had so many more complaints this last year or so. I think it was more than they had in the previous 10 years.
Really?
So I think there's been a surge in demand for their services, shall we say.
Right.
I think you're right, and I know that the Ombudsman does tend to refer them back to see if they can be resolved locally. If they can, that's certainly the best way of dealing with it, but sometimes the parties involved will not agree to try and deal with it locally. So, but that is the best way of trying to deal with it. You've got some element of control there. You've got no control over sanctions, of course. You don't have any power to do that as councils. Standards committees do, of course. But there is sometimes the opportunity there of bringing some common sense to prevail and getting people to understand this is leading nowhere. No one's going to win from this. Why don't you try and settle your differences with an apology, or one of you commit to do some training? That's usually the best way, but there are some complaints that people won't entertain getting involved with locally, and at the end of the day, the only option you've got then is to submit it to the Ombudsman, and they're very much their resources are based on a standard number of complaints, and if there's suddenly a big increase, which I know there was, how can you resource that? And investigators are not easy to come by. They're very well trained people. You can't just pick one out of the air. So it is not easy for the Ombudsman. We're aware of that.
Thank you. I think we've just got time for one more question because we need to move on otherwise. Claire.
Great, thanks Paul. That presentation was really helpful. I just wondered what mechanisms are in place at a local level to get feedback from clerks?
Right, okay. Well, probably not a lot really. One Voice Wales is an organisation that supports its member councils through training, advice, representation. But we're not an organisation that's sufficiently well resourced at the moment, although that may change in the not too distant future, where we can actually research issues which are occurring locally and have a database of this kind of information. But at the current time, we're not really in a position to do that. So the only feedback I get is when either myself or another HR professional carry out an investigation and we know what that outcome is. So I can't really answer that one. I think it's something for One Voice Wales to consider for the future.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for giving up so much of your time, extended to what you expected.
That's all right, no problem.
For a very, very interesting talk and a lot of interesting initiatives that we're going to look at further. So
Okay.
thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Bye all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Right, so we now need to continue with our meeting. I'll just check with Clive. Barry Thomas is sitting in with us for this that presentation. Presumably there's no objection, as this is a public meeting, that he stays until his turn.
Absolutely not. That's fine.
That's fine, thank you.
Unless, Chairman, it's possible to, Barry's been waiting for a little while. I wonder if we could take his application for a dispensation now.
Normally not. Yeah, but I think the other things are fairly brief, so we stick to the orders. So we had no apologies for this.
No apologies for this meeting.
Right, minutes. Does anybody have any issues with the previous minutes? 8th of Feb. Sent that a couple of weeks ago. Are you happy for the chair to sign? Okay. Right, then it's the report of Clive, the head of the Legal and Monitoring Office. So Clive, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. In view of the fact that Councillor Barry Thomas has been with us for a little while, I'll speed through the first part of it. The first is about referrals to the Public Service Ombudsman. Members will see from the report that there have been two decisions, and we have one decision which is to not investigate, whilst two not investigating, and one which is still outstanding. And the next item on the agenda, Chair, is the dispensation from Councillor Barry Thomas, and members will see from pages 7, 8 and 9 of the bundle the paperwork which has been submitted by Councillor Thomas, and I'd invite Councillor Thomas to explain to the Standards Committee why he considers that he should have a dispensation to participate in proposals to extend the caravan and chalet park in his area.
Chairman, I before you start, I should perhaps declare an interest, as I know Councillor Thomas. So I don't know whether that means I can stay, go, or shut up.
Richard, this just knowing Councillor Thomas doesn't prevent you from participating in the debate. Do you consider him to be a friend or a close associate? That's
Good Lord, no.
Um,
Yes, I do. Yes, but
so
not
yes,
a-
you do consider him to be a close friend or not?
not a close friend, no.
Okay, yeah, then you're okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Just like-
Thank you. Good morning to you, Clive, as well, first.
Good
Or
morning,
is it
Barry. Nice to see
afternoon
you
now, I
again.
think? Anyway, well, the reason why I applied for a dispensation on this issue is that it's in the early stages, the application hasn't actually gone in, and it's quite a large application in our community. And I am a community councillor, and I could have took the easy way out of just declaring interest and do nothing. But I feel that it doesn't just affect close to my property. The site goes on, say, half a mile, at least half a mile from what they're proposing to do in other parts of the site. And I think it's only fair for the community to have representations of from the community council. It's also fair for the applicant that he from his side that everything is seen to be done fair. But I lived in the area all my life, and I have a considerable amount of knowledge, which I think is very important that the council know. Not all of the councillors have been on the council for the time I've been. That doesn't give me no extra rights to anybody else. I fully accept that. But I just thought that it was only right and proper for me to ask for dispensation to speak at the meeting. I would not ask to vote. I think that would be taking it too far, but I think I can't see why I can't speak at a meeting and give my views, and I think it's only fair for the community at large in general.
Would this proposal affect you financially?
No. Not in my, well, not in
Positively
my,
or negatively?
well, how long's a piece of string? That's the simple question. I can't put an answer. I would not be looking for any financial gain out of it. I can't see what financial gain there is to me one way or the other. There may be a possibility that he would want some ground to widen the road, but that's one thing that I wouldn't be prepared to sell in any case. And I would say this, in all fairness, I'm not here because I'm totally opposed to the application, and that is genuine. There may be some parts of it, you know, you don't know until you see it on paper exactly what it is. And when I rung up, my understanding was that you don't meet again to October, and I thought, well, it was important to put the application in now, so as I've got the dots dotted and the T's crossed for when it does come to the community council.
Thank you. Do any members have any further questions of Jonathan?
Councillor Jonathan Goulden, I'm an independent lay member. I live on Raven Square, so I tend to shoot past Golfer Bank, but I've had a look at the site on Google Maps.
Yes.
Could you just tell us a bit more about what the application? So, you know, the current size of the site, it's relatively significant for the size of the road and the current size of the village. What's the application going to be for?
Well, with respect, it isn't a village, it's a community with respect. Well, we don't. There's been a meeting. There was a meeting that the community attended that was at the club house with the proposals, and the proposal of my understanding from what I've been told, and I emphasize this, I've got no proof of this, it's only hearsay, but it is to at least double the size of the site. And there is a proposal to bring the caravans. You know where the site is. You know when you pass where Banbury Fuels is.
Yeah.
Well, just for your information, I own that site.
Okay.
I own that site at Banbury Fuels. That's why I've said in my thing that there's property that I own that is leased.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I own that site, and obviously there is a proposal to bring the caravans very close to that site
Yeah.
as well. And you must bear in mind that is under 24/7 operation.
Yeah.
But there is a proposal to take a lot of caravans. I don't know, have you ever been up the lane and passed have you been to the clubhouse ever?
No.
Well, you go up the lane, which is about, well, Richard, you know, it's 3/4 of a mile from if you go up the road, isn't it? And then there is a proposal to put caravans or charis or something, as I understand, and I say understand, the other side as well. So that wouldn't really have the drastic effect on me.
Yeah.
As it all. But I do feel, as a person who lives in the community, I should have a right to my view whenever this application comes. That's just my on it. And I thought, well, if I don't ask, I don't know. And nobody can say now, I've got a job as a community councillor. If you tell me today I can't take part, well, I can say to the community, well, I've been to the standards committee and they've told me that. But I very much hope, in the interest of democracy, that I am allowed to speak.
I think, Chairman, my second question was going to be, so you're one of 8 members of the community.
Yeah, I think it's 8 of the community council.
And I think the really critical question is, what special knowledge and awareness do you bring that will help the community council reach an informed decision on this that your colleagues can't bring to the table? And you mentioned that you own the Banwy Fuels site, so is that part of it?
Sorry, I'm not with you.
It's really just, what special knowledge and
well, I read there since I've read there since I was a baby, actually, within a half a mile of that site. I've seen the site before I can remember, when it was all fields, and I can even remember where the caravans are now, when it was a field, a meadow, when it was, I can remember that. And I think things are moving, and that knowledge of how things were and what extra effect B can have, one's got the knowledge to say, well, it was, you can give the knowledge and the feedback of how it's changing. And I think it's very important for the community to have that.
Yeah, but would your fellow councillors not have knowledge? Presumably they all live quite close to the site as well.
There are some, but there are some who weren't born when it all started, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to get over.
Yeah. So you've seen the community and how that road has been, you've seen the changes in the use of that road and the highways access over a period of time.
Well, I've seen it over the period of 60 odd years.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying. But I emphasize I haven't come here because I'm totally opposed to the application.
Yeah.
I'm not. I judgment for that at another date, isn't it?
And my last question, Chairman, is if you were granted the dispensation to speak, would that be on the basis that you obviously wouldn't take part in the vote? How would you make sure that your 7 colleagues, were seen to take a vote, and take their own decision on this?
Well, it would be very clear at the beginning of the meeting, if I understand that I have to declare whatever the decision you made. So the chairman of the council, I would declare that. And I would make sure that I didn't actually, perhaps, if you wanted clarity, I could actually read the table when the vote was being taken.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
I think we should bear in mind, Chair, that if Barry wasn't a councillor and just happened to be owning the property adjacent to the site, he would certainly be able to attend and speak at the local council meetings. And again, when the planning application is considered. So I think the least we can do is allow him to speak to this issue.
That's an issue to be dealt with afterwards. So, but have you got any particular question of Barry Thomas?
No.
No. Okay, that's fine. Does anybody have any questions?
Chair,
Right.
I have a question. Councillor Thomas, I know that at one stage you did have ownership of a number of caravan sites. Not sure whether that's you still do, and if you do you have any in the area which might be impacted by an extension to this particular caravan site?
All I own in Powys, and I don't own no sites nowhere now.
Oh, right, okay.
All I have in Powys, I haven't, can I make the record straight? I've never owned a site in Powys. I've never owned a site in Powys, and I don't wish to declare whether I did own them because that's my personal private business. But I do have a CL site that is close to the proposal. And just to give you some idea, I don't know if any of you know what a CL site is.
No,
A CL site is a site that you can only have caravan club members on it. And it's a maximum of 5, and they're towers, and they can only stop for 28 days at a maximum, and it must be for holiday use. It's got quite limited use.
Yeah.
This is what I understand is not for towers. Well, I understand it was said in the meeting that this application, he does at the moment have towers, but my understanding, and I say my understanding, is that he proposes not to have any towers at all. So I don't see that I have a conflict of interest. Does that answer your question, Mr. Penny?
Thank you, Barry. I just need to ask that question.
Oh, I totally accept. I totally accept what you're saying.
And can I just ask one further question, if you don't mind? You've indicated in your application that you own adjacent land.
Yes.
And I totally accept that this may be somewhat an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Apologies for that. Do you think that if this extension took place, that that extension would devalue your land?
I honestly, and I have to give you the answer, Clive, I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I honestly don't know.
Okay. Thank you ever so much for that. Really, really appreciate it.
It could, and it could not. I honestly do not know.
Any other questions from anyone else? Nigel?
Just one of practicality. Thank you, Councillor Thomas, for your application. I just want to get a better understanding regarding how you've responded to section 1 and why you're limiting the request to attending the meetings and speaking at meetings before we make a final decision.
Sorry, Nigel. Ms. Thomas is having difficulty hearing you. I'm not sure whether it's the volume, but it does sound somewhat muted.
Oh,
would it be better if I went to there to hear it?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's quite easy.
Yeah.
Where's the speaker? Right.
Right.
Carry on, sir.
Right, try again, Nigel.
right. I'm just looking at my settings. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just about.
Just about. I'm just referring to section 1, Councillor, and note that you've ticked just 2 categories that you wish us to consider. Before we make our final decision, are there reasons why you haven't asked us to participate in any other ways, such as making written representations or oral representations? You've given us an honest response in terms of a description of what you want to do. Are you limiting yourself to to your activities by just ticking 2 boxes here. Hello?
Well, you make a very valid point. I must admit, I hadn't noticed that one. Perhaps I would want to make written representations as well. But from the experience that I've had with council, I knew it would be very unfair to ask to vote anyway in a meeting. Well, it wouldn't be, I wouldn't accept you to, you know, from the knowledge I have, I would have thought that that would have been a question not to ask. But perhaps I should, with respect, perhaps the box for written representation should be ticked. I hadn't noticed that. Clive, without going into the detail, I'm not the best with paperwork, and I'll say no more than that.
I'm sure the committee will take into account, Councillor, what you said, and will consider a request on your behalf to make representations.
Anybody else? Any other questions? No. Just one quick one. I noticed you say you've got an easement for water pipe going through your property too. And
Yeah.
Will that need to be changed at all if the proposal goes?
Well, it's very simple. The easement is there. It's marked where it is. It can't be changed.
No, would it need to be upgraded? So would they have to dig up your field to put a new pipe in?
Well, they wouldn't have to, because there's a duct in there and it's been put there years ago. That isn't a problem. I can't answer your question, but it wouldn't be a problem and I wouldn't be unreasonable about that. But on the other hand, if I remember right, it says the maximum of the bore.
Yeah.
So they couldn't increase it for that. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think then that concludes the matters for as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
So
you want me to go up? Yes.
So, but first of all, thank you for your patience because of the long delay in getting started.
No problem.
Do appreciate that. So thank you very much. And thank
well,
you.
As I say, if you come to the conclusion I can't speak, I fully understand. Only if I didn't ask, you don't get to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. After much discussion,
Yes.
I think our main difficulty has been there's a lot of unknowns.
Accept that.
Yeah. And we have to, just in case it moves one way or the other that we don't know, it could we might have egg on our faces. So to err on the side of caution,
Yeah.
we've decided to grant you a dispensation, but only a written one.
Right.
So you can write your views or whatever, but not to speak.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question, Clive? Because I need to know this as a community councillor. If there is a public meeting and I'm after having this meeting, can I attend a public meeting to listen to what's being said?
If it's a public meeting arranged by the community council, no. But if it's any other, yes.
But if it's arranged by the community council, it's no.
It will then be a community council meeting, yes?
Yes, but
And in those circumstances,
if the developer arranged a meeting again, as he did on his property, it's perfectly I'd be perfectly legally entitled to go, even if this community council is there.
Yes, because it's a non-community council meeting, and so happy for you to do that. And because you don't know if there are going to be any community councillors there until you arrive, do you?
No, I don't. No. Thank you very much for that. Well, I understand. That's fair enough. But I can make representation. I can
make a written representation.
I can get a solicitor to do that on my behalf.
Yes. Councillor Thomas, I will be writing to you to confirm the decision, and that'll be within the next 7 days. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine, Clive. There's no rush. Anyway, can I thank you very much for your time?
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
I'm sure I know you've given it a lot of consideration. Thank you very much.
Sorry for the delay this morning.
No problem at all.
Thank you, Barry. Bye bye.
Ta-ra, Clive. Look after yourself. And Richard, all the best.
Members, I should indicate that I didn't want to tell before. Councillor Thomas used to be the leader of Powys County Council, and that's how I know.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't want to say that at all before you made your decision.
Can I just quickly come in, Clive? I'm not sure if we've told him the right thing, that's all, because I think my understanding was we weren't going to give him a dispensation, but make it clear that he could still write in as a member of the public.
No, I think we've given him the right to a dispensation to make written representations only.
Right, in his capacity as a community councillor.
Yes.
Right, okay. Which I suppose would still be treated as not a statutory consultee, so it wouldn't get published on the. Yeah, that's fine. It's effectively the same thing. Yeah.
Same
okay.
thing, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
As a matter of interest, Chairman, before you move on this list on section 1, what is the difference between speak at a meeting and make oral representation? Looks like a distinction without a difference to me.
Well, Jonathan's asked the very same question earlier on, Councillor Richard, and there is no difference, is there, in reality?
No. Okay.
Well, I think there is a subtle difference.
A subtle difference.
So let's assume we were the community council sitting here, and we were going to discuss our views on this particular. We were consulted on the planning application. I think there is a difference to Councillor Thomas sitting there and listening to everything and taking part in that discussion. That is speaking at a meeting, whereas making oral representations is Councillor Thomas coming into the room and saying, well, this is my views on this, and then going out. I think, to me, that's the difference.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Right, so let's move on.
Chair, back to the report. Section C. I give you in section C. We give you the latest Ombudsman's findings. For members who may have searched the word Powys, you will have come across quite a large number of complaints which were received by the Ombudsman. But in terms of code of conduct, we've already reported on those. Yeah. Oh, sorry. This this is the community council as well. So sorry. That was my comment for the standards committee. Then on to the last item, which is the meeting date. The next meeting date is the 25th of October at 2 p.m. Chair.
That's fine. Right. We now need to move on to the standards committee.
Very brief question, Chairman, and. It's going to be the same question on the same information when we get to the other committee, so I'm not going to ask it twice. We've heard about delays in the Ombudsman's office. The reference number to the Councillor Donald Jenkins case, and indeed for Sheila Jenkins, suggests to me that the complaint was made 2 years ago. That's not really acceptable. And I wonder if it would be possible that where we have this report from Clive, it actually says, is it possible, Clive, for you to indicate in a table date of complaint made, date of some key stages? I'm really looking for the committee to be able to raise in an informed way in the future this issue of delay and capacity with the Ombudsman's office, and so I'm not wishing to constrain you, but you can see where I'm coming on this.
Yes, we can certainly do that. We've got the information, and you're absolutely right, Jonathan. These complaints were complaint number 11 in 21 and complaint 12 in 21. So the precise date in 21, I don't know. We do. Sorry, we have the information, but I can't give it to you at this moment in time. But in future, we'll change the reporting mechanism to reflect the date when Powys were informed of the complaint.
Thank you very much. That's what I've covered. Before